The word simp gets thrown around like a joke online, but what it really describes is a pattern. A series of behaviors driven by fear of losing someone instead of confidence in who you are. And women clock it instantly. Now, while most men don't realize when they're simping and it causing them respect, attraction, and their sanity. So stick with me till the end. Let's find if you watching me right now, are a simp. In this video, I'm going to break down the top signs that you're a simp in dating, the behaviors women notice immediately and quietly lose respect for. And by the end, you'll know exactly where you stand, what to do if you recognize yourself in these habits, and what actually changes the outcome. 1. You spend money on her without commitment. This one gets men in trouble fast because it feels generous while quietly signaling desperation. Spending money isn't the issue, the timing is. When investment shows up before clarity, it doesn't read as confidence. It reads as trying to buy safety. Here's what's happening psychologically. Money is effort. Effort is value. When value is given before anything is established, the brain doesn't register it as romance. It registers it as approval seeking, and approval seeking immediately lowers perceived status. How rude. From a woman's perspective, unearned spending creates pressure instead of attraction. It tells her you're more invested in keeping her interested than in whether she's actually earned a place in your life. That imbalance is where respect quietly exits the room. Picture this. Early dating. No exclusivity. No clear direction. You're paying for expensive dinners, surprise gifts, covering rides, maybe even solving problems that are not yours to solve. On the surface, it looks attentive. Underneath, it says you're afraid to slow things down, so you speed them up with your wallet. Not ideal. What happens next is predictable. The effort becomes expected. When it stops, disappointment shows up. When it continues, attraction doesn't increase. It plateaus or drops. Because nothing feels earned. There's no progression, just maintenance. This is where sanity starts leaking. Resentment builds quietly. You start thinking, after all I've done. Meanwhile, she's thinking, this was his choice. And she's right. Healthy investment grows alongside clarity. It responds to mutual effort, not uncertainty. Money used to enhance an already balanced dynamic feels good. Money used to create one feels heavy. The fix isn't being cheap, it's being grounded. Invest when the situation earns it, not before. When you stop trying to buy emotional security, respect has room to come back. 2. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. Apologies are supposed to repair damage, but when you apologize for things you didn't break, you're not being kind, you're negotiating for peace. And that's where the problem starts. Over-apologizing is usually driven by discomfort with tension. The nervous system senses conflict and immediately looks for the fastest exit. So the mouth says, sorry, before the brain checks whether responsibility actually applies. Anxiety grabbed the steering wheel. Again. From a woman's perspective, unnecessary apologies don't feel reassuring. They feel unstable. When a man takes blame for everything, even situations outside his control, it quietly signals a lack of emotional backbone, not in a dramatic way, in a subtle, disappointing one. Imagine this. She's in a bad mood from her day. Short replies, sharp tone. You ask what's wrong, and suddenly you're apologizing for making things worse, even though nothing you did caused it. That apology doesn't calm the situation. It reframes you as the emotional culprit. So now you're fixing a problem that was never yours. Over time, this shifts the dynamic. You become the emotional shock absorber. Every discomfort gets routed through you. And each apology reinforces the idea that you're responsible for regulating her emotions. That's exhausting and unattractive. Apologizing when you're wrong shows maturity. Apologizing when you're not shows fear. Women don't lose respect because you make mistakes. They lose respect when you erase yourself to avoid friction. A grounded response sounds different. Calm, direct, not defensive, not apologetic. You can acknowledge feelings without accepting blame. Those are two separate things. When apologies become reflexive, attraction fades because leadership disappears. Emotional steadiness replaces people-pleasing. And ironically, that steadiness is what makes conflict feel safer, not scarier. 3. You defend her when she's clearly wrong. This one usually comes disguised as loyalty, but loyalty without discernment isn't strength, it's avoidance. And women feel the difference immediately. Defending someone when they're clearly in the wrong doesn't make you supportive. It makes you look afraid of disagreement, afraid of being seen as disloyal, afraid of rocking the boat. And fear has a smell. It's subtle, but it's there. From a psychological angle, this behavior signals a missing internal compass. When a man abandons his own judgment to protect someone else from accountability, he's communicating that his values are flexible under pressure. That doesn't feel safe. It feels unreliable. Picture a public situation. She snaps at a waiter or says something unfair in a group setting. Later, instead of addressing it privately or holding a calm boundary, you jump in to justify it. You smooth it over. You explain it away. You become her defense attorney. Not ideal. What registers isn't, he's on my side. What registers is, he'll compromise his principles to keep me happy. That creates an unspoken imbalance. If you won't hold standards with her, she can't trust you to hold them anywhere else. Real respect grows when a man can disagree without hostility and hold someone accountable without humiliation. That balance shows strength. Blind defense shows dependency. There's also a long-term cost. Resentment. Every time you swallow your perspective to avoid friction, it stacks. Eventually it leaks out as passive aggression, distance, or emotional shutdown. And when that happens, nobody wins. Being grounded means choosing honesty over harmony when it matters. Calmly, privately, without ego, without drama. Women don't lose attraction because a man disagrees. They lose it when he disappears in order to agree. 4. You chase harder when she pulls away. This is where a lot of men completely lose the plot. She gets distant, replies slow down, energy drops, and instead of pausing, observing, or regulating emotion, pursuit goes into overdrive. More texts, longer messages, extra reassurance. Suddenly he's trying to CPR a connection that hasn't technically flatlined, but definitely needs space. Not ideal. Psychologically, this is an anxious attachment response. The nervous system interprets distance as danger, so it demands action. Any action. Logic gets overridden. His discipline just clocked out for the day. From a woman's side, that chase doesn't feel romantic. It feels like pressure. Attraction needs space to breathe. When space disappears, desire follows it out the door. What she experiences isn't he cares, it's he can't self-regulate. Picture this. She says she's busy and needs time. Instead of respecting it, messages keep coming. Just checking in, just making sure everything's okay, just one more thought. Each one feels small to him. Together, they feel overwhelming to her. What happens next is predictable. She pulls back harder, not to be cruel, but to regain breathing room. And now the chase intensifies. Congratulations, anxiety just became the main character. Chasing during withdrawal communicates that your emotional state depends on her behavior. That's heavy. And no one is attracted to being responsible for someone else's emotional balance. The irony is brutal. The thing that feels like it might save the connection is the exact thing pushing it further away. So yeah, bad day to be his confidence. Emotional strength shows up as restraint, pausing, letting silence exist, trusting that if interest is real, it doesn't need to be chased. Pulling back when she pulls away isn't manipulation. It's self-respect. And that calm response is often the only thing that restores attraction, if it's going to return at all. 5. You let her control the relationship narrative. This one is subtle, and that's why it does so much damage. Control of the relationship narrative isn't about dominance. It's about who defines reality, who decides what something means. When a man constantly accepts her framing without question, he slowly hands over his agency and doesn't even notice it happening. This shows up in conversations that sound reasonable on the surface. She labels the situation. She defines intentions. She decides what your actions mean. And instead of clarifying or holding your own perspective, you nod along just to keep things smooth. Not ideal. Psychologically, this is a loss of internal authority. When you let someone else tell you who you are, what you meant, or what your role is, you signal uncertainty in your own identity. That uncertainty reads as weakness, not cooperation. Imagine a disagreement. She says, "You're being distant," or "You don't care as much as I do." Instead of calmly stating your reality, you accept the label and start defending against it. Now you're arguing inside her frame. You're playing a game you didn't design. From a woman's perspective, this doesn't feel collaborative. It feels like emotional over-accommodation. There's no polarity when one person holds the pen and the other just signs the paper. Healthy dynamics require two grounded perspectives, not one narrator and one supporting character. When you abandon your frame, attraction erodes because leadership disappears. The fix isn't arguing, it's clarity, stating your intentions, correcting inaccurate interpretations, not emotionally, not defensively, just calmly. A man who can hold his perspective without needing approval feels solid, safe, trustworthy. When you stop surrendering the narrative, respect has space to return. 6. You're afraid to say no. Nothing exposes insecurity faster than a man who can't say no. This doesn't usually show up as obedience. It shows up as flexibility taken too far. Always available, always agreeable, always adjusting. On the surface, it looks considerate. Underneath, it's fear of disapproval, wearing a polite mask. Psychologically, this comes from equating acceptance with worth. Saying no feels risky, so the nervous system chooses compliance. His boundaries quietly pack their bags and leave. How rude. From a woman's perspective, a man who never says no doesn't feel generous. He feels hollow. Boundaries signal self-trust. Without them, there's nothing to push against. And attraction needs resistance the same way muscles do. Picture this. You're exhausted. You had plans. She asks for something last minute. Instead of being honest, you agree. Again. Internally, frustration builds. Externally, you smile. That emotional debt doesn't disappear. It compounds. Over time, this dynamic flips. The more you say yes, the less your yes means. Your time becomes infinitely available, which makes it infinitely less valuable. Not ideal. Saying no calmly and respectfully doesn't create distance. It creates structure. It shows you have priorities that don't evaporate under pressure. That steadiness feels safe, predictable, grounded. This isn't about being difficult or withholding. It's about being honest. A man who can say no without guilt communicates self-respect without saying a word. When fear runs the relationship, attraction fades. When boundaries exist, desire has something solid to lean against. 7. You put her above yourself, all the time. This is the one that feels noble while quietly doing the most damage. Putting someone first occasionally is healthy. Doing it constantly is self-erasure. When a man reorganizes his entire life around a woman, it doesn't signal devotion. It signals lack of direction. And attraction does not survive being the center of someone else's universe. Psychologically, this comes from outsourcing meaning. Purpose, validation, motivation all get rerouted into one person. So when she's happy, he's grounded. When she's distant, everything collapses. His sense of self just got outsourced. Not ideal. From a woman's perspective, being placed above a man's goals, routines, friendships, and discipline feels heavy fast. At first, it looks flattering. Then it feels suffocating. Because now she's not just dating him. She's responsible for his emotional equilibrium. Picture this. He starts skipping the gym, stops seeing friends, delays career moves, cancels plans the moment she's available. His life shrinks, hers stays the same. Attraction doesn't grow in that environment. It withers. Stoic principles are clear here. A man without inner order cannot lead himself, let alone a relationship. Discipline, purpose, and self-respect come before attachment, not after. What makes this worse is the silent resentment that follows. He gave up pieces of himself and expects appreciation in return. When it doesn't come, frustration builds. That frustration leaks out as moodiness, neediness, or emotional withdrawal. Women don't want to be a man's entire world. They want to be invited into a full one. When you prioritize your life, your mission, and your standards, time spent together feels intentional instead of obligatory. That balance is where attraction stays alive. If you saw yourself in more than one of these, relax. This isn't a character flaw. It's a pattern. And patterns can be changed once they're exposed. Simping isn't about being kind, generous, or emotionally available. It's about trading self-respect for temporary peace. It's choosing short-term comfort over long-term attraction. And every time that choice is made, respect quietly leaves first. Attraction follows. Sanity eventually joins them. What actually changes outcomes isn't acting colder, harsher, or pretending not to care. It's emotional regulation, boundaries, self-leadership. When a man is grounded in his own life, his own direction, his own standards, relationships stop feeling like emotional hostage situations. Here's the uncomfortable but freeing part. The moment you stop trying to be chosen, you become choosable. When approval stops being the goal, confidence starts showing up without effort. Now I want to hear from you. Which one hit hardest? Which habit did you recognize immediately? Drop it in the comments. I actually read them, and I reach out. This channel exists for real conversations, not silent scrolling. If this video gave you clarity, like it so more men see it. Share it with someone who needs a wake-up call. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. That part is non-negotiable. Because the next video breaks down what replaces these habits and why it completely changes how women respond to you.